Hello everyone, Nick the DM here with some more Dungeons & Dragons lore. Today we're traveling into the lower planes, specifically the Abyss, to take a look at the Demon Lord Ahazu. So, let's get into it. The Demon Lord Ahazu has a few mentions throughout the editions of Dungeons & Dragons, and although he is more of a passive Demon Lord compared to the more aggressive rulers of the Abyss, the power he holds is absolute. Ahazu's portfolio, basically his interests, or what would be his domain if he was a deity, consists of the Night and abduction, and his proficiency in the latter option allowing him to hold the title of the Seizer. In the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st Edition Monster Manual number 2, Ahazu is listed as a Lesser Demon Lord, quote, "Those of lesser stature who do not have complete sovereignty over an entire layer are indicated by an L in brackets for Lord rather than Prince," end quote. This is because Ahazu doesn't technically control the layer on which he can be found, and he isn't really on a layer of the Abyss currently. And though the Wells of Darkness doesn't have an official lord, many of the properties of the layer were established by Ahazu. Later editions are consistent with this, specifically the 3rd edition Fiendish Codex number 1, Hordes of the Abyss, well technically 3.5e, which also lists him as a demon lord without control of a layer. But there are some specifics that we'll touch on in a bit when we look at Ahazu's history. Cue the seamless transition. Ahazu's origin is unknown, which means he is either very old or wasn't worth notice until his rise to power, which is detailed in Dungeon Magazine 148. In ages past, Ahazu found himself on a layer of the Abyss which is now known as the 73rd layer, the Wells of Darkness, a finite layer of the Abyss that lies within an endless void completely surrounding the physical core of the plane. This void is known as Shattered Night, and may be the primal chaos that exists outside of the Abyss itself. I'll touch more on the Wells of Darkness and Shattered Night in another video specifically about those two. We'll just touch on the stuff important to Ahazu for this video. Ahazu discovered that, by digging deep shafts in the terrain, he could reach thin spots in the membrane that surrounds the physical core of the plane, separating it from Shattered Night. Each hole dug creating a black window into the gulfs of Shattered Night. Finally, after many years of digging into the 73rd layer of the Abyss, Ahazu found a planar tear in the depths below a great tor, which is a hill or rocky peak, in the heart of the layer, and he stepped through into Shattered Night, never to return. After Ahazu stepped into the void, leaving the Abyss, his followers discovered that he could be contacted through strange and secret magics, for Ahazu had become a vestige, a fragmentary echo of existence. In the years that followed, the cult of Ahazu built a great fortress called Overlook atop the tor that contained the planar tear their master stepped through. From there, they could speak to Ahazu and receive his wisdom. The Seizer demanded regular offerings in the form of prisoners to join him in the void. He had his cult place these prisoners near the thin spots in the membrane of the layers at the bottom of the wells he himself had dug. Once imprisoned, a prisoner could be contacted telepathically by those in close proximity to their well, but could not otherwise escape, though there are a few more specific details for each individual, but if it's an important individual, I'll touch on it in a separate video. However, the power of their master led the cult of Ahazu to make a terrible mistake. They attempted to capture and imprison their greatest challenge yet, one of the demon princes of the Abyss, Orcus. Led by hubris and pride, their assault on the 33rd layer of the Abyss, Thanatos, failed miserably, and in response, Orcus unleashed a horde of demons upon the Wells of Darkness. This force quickly laid waste to the cult of Ahazu, leaving the Fortress of Overlook in ruins. Ahazu was left with no followers and with little hope of gaining more, for few inhabitants of the Abyss visit the Wells of Darkness, and even fewer are skilled in pact making. Incalculable ages after the fall of Overlook, a tribe of outcast Varangoin, bat-like monstrous humanoids common in other parts of the abyss, discovered the ruins of the fortress. Among them was a trio of arcanists who also dabbled in pact magic. The coven of Varangoin binders were delighted to discover Ahazu and adopted the Seizer as their patron. At Ahazu's word, this new coven resumed his cult's practice of imprisoning creatures in the Wells of Darkness. However, the Varangoin were much craftier than their predecessors. They realized that the Wells of Darkness was a resource that the rest of the Abyss would pay dearly for. So instead of abducting prisoners on their own, the Varangoin coven offered to act as wardens for the prisoners brought to them in exchange for magical power, knowledge, and respect. Demon lords, archdevils, and even the gods themselves took them up on their generous offer, and soon the Wells of Darkness came to host powerful prisoners. The coven even managed to convince Ahazu to release prisoners on rare occasions in exchange for the promise of more powerful replacements. These promises, or pacts, required the liberator to pledge their body and essence to eternal imprisonment if they failed to deliver the replacement prisoner. The coven also convinced Ahazu to offer great power to any demon foolish enough to pledge its essence to eternal imprisonment after death on another plane. So instead of reforming in the abyss, a demon killed on another plane would be drawn into the Wells of Darkness. In addition, Ahazu can create other binding pacts to draw creatures into Shattered Night, once certain conditions are fulfilled, such as death, the passage of time, or the failure to deliver on a promise, or more likely, a prisoner. Ahazu has apparently discovered a way around the bindings of the wells. He can expel a creature through the thin spot at the bottom of the Well of Darkness they can be seen through if he so desires, though how much power he actually has over Shattered Night is a matter of dispute, seeing as he himself seems unable to use these methods to free himself. In actuality, he may not want to escape, but we'll touch on that in a bit. Over the course of the existence of the Wells of Darkness, only 4 prisoners have ever managed to escape. Beamon the Unhealing Wound, the Merilith Queen Shaktari, Siragal the Ineffable, and vaunted Zixizia. I don't know how to pronounce that. Their wells have closed and the windows to Shattered Night are no longer available. Such escapees are so rare and notable that anyone that follows the history of the Abyss can name them from memory. In truth, all of these escapes were actually prisoner exchanges in which said prisoner was exchanged for a more powerful creature. Though there is a brief mention in Dungeon Magazine issue 148 saying that escaping from the wells requires the Lords of Woe or the intervention of a greater deity, but some facts I will touch on later make it seem like these entities may just make the trade easier to negotiate. I believe that these are still known as escapes from the Wells of Darkness because it benefits both parties. First, it makes the escapee seem more powerful, and their reappearance could not go unnoticed if they are a powerful figure. And secondly, it makes it seem like Ahazu's deals can be weaseled out of, which would make other powerful figures more willing to enter a pact with him. But that's just my opinion, that's not sourced anywhere, that's just my own personal thoughts on the matter. The Fortress of Overlook is guarded by the spawn of Ahazu, 4 Nightwings summoned as a result of Ulricon, a member of the Fraternity of Order, and some of his followers trying and failing to bind Ahazu to their will. These Nightwings forced the members of the Fraternity of Order to flee and now haunt the Fortress of Overlook, and are responsible for the occasional appearance of wraiths and specters. The fate of Ulricon himself is unknown to most beings. In reality, he was pulled into Shattered Night long ago to merge with Ahazu. The inner chamber of Overlook and the Well of Ahazu are protected by an ancient Forbiddance spell with a caster level of 20th, meaning it was cast by a 20th level spellcaster. Whichever combination of classes brought it to 20th level, that's unknown. This spell is keyed to chaotic evil, which causes creatures not of that alignment to make a DC 28 will save or take damage based on how different their alignment is, as described by the spell. The spell also prevents all magical and planar travel within its area, such as planar travel, teleportation, dimension door, and summoning. The center of the floor of the Tower of Overlook is covered by a 40-foot wide circular mosaic made of hundreds of stone tiles, which create a scale model of the entire layer of the Wells of Darkness, complete with inky pools with the demonic seals of their inhabitants to signify the Wells of Darkness. In the center of this mosaic, where the Fortress of Overlook should be, is instead the Pool of Ahazu. This mosaic is the key to opening the Well of Ahazu. Pressing a tile causes it to depress a fraction of an inch and turn black. If the tiles are pressed in the pattern of the sign of Ahazu, the floor folds outwards, overlapping impossibly back on itself. The floor stays open for 1 minute before closing, though thankfully for any curious wanderers, it can be opened from beneath by a single touch. The Well of Ahazu is the greatest of the Wells of Darkness, the last of the shafts dug by Ahazu and the only one that leads directly into Shattered Night through the planar tear. The Well of Ahazu is 200 feet deep and is 40 feet in diameter. The walls of the shaft are gouged and scratched as if the claws of a great beast clawed its way into the depths long ago, which is what happened. Thousands of silent ants cling to the upper walls of the shaft. 3 swarms of abyssal ants in game statistics. Their cold blue eyes and dripping mandibles eerily still. A creature that stands on the door of the mosaic as it opens or jumps to the bottom of the well falls the full 200 feet, taking 20d6 of damage, as for the 3.5e statistics, from falling, and then the creature has to make a DC 25 reflex save to avoid landing directly on the planar rift at the base of the well, and we'll talk about the repercussions of that in a little bit. The base of the Well of Ahazu is cold and stony. A 20-foot diameter glossy black pool ripples in the center of the floor. This is the planar rift into Shattered Night and the window into Ahazu's prison. A 10-foot ring around the pool is covered in stacks of hundreds of books, scrolls, and stone tablets. This is the vast library of the Keepers of Ahazu. Interspersed among this library are perches made of bone, upon which the Keepers of Ahazu rest, each standing near a twisted lectern. These keepers are the ruling coven of Varangoins, the trio of arcanists who made Ahazu their patron. They spend most of their time ensconced within this chamber, studying their collection or communing with Ahazu. The Varangoin binders of Ahazu have discovered a method of attaining lichdom without a phylactery. The Well of Ahazu itself functions as their phylactery. If they are destroyed, their spirits are cast into Shattered Night to be absorbed by Ahazu himself, but until then they are effectively immortal. Statistically, this is identical to the 3.5e Lich template, just applied to a non-humanoid creature, which is kind of weird because they were described as humanoid-esque, but they're not considered humanoids. This doesn't seem all that much better than the classic Lich, considering the Varangoin cannot reform after time, instead only having 1 life before being absorbed, but it is cheaper than making a phylactery. They still get the normal benefits, and they still get immortality, so that's really up for debate. Both the ants and the Varangoin binders attack anyone attempting to reach the Pool of Ahazu. The library surrounding the pool is poorly organized but well stocked. It focuses on the mysteries of the abyss with a particular focus on dead and forgotten demon lords. Alright, I guess I know my next vacation destination. The entire collection can grant a plus 10 bonus on knowledge of the planes checks about these topics, if it's organized. The collection has a total worth of 12,000 gold pieces. There are also dozens of spellbooks, some from the Varangoins and some from Ulricon the Necromancer. This multi-volume collection contains every spell in the 3.5e Player's Handbook with the exception of illusion and enchantment spells, which are Ulricon's forbidden spells. Though some additional necromancy spells from other sources are permitted to be added by the DM, so any wizard that stumbles upon this collection is going to have a field day. Finally, the last two notable treasures are a blank tome, inside of which is hidden an amulet of the plains, and a copy of the Demonomicon of Igwilv, which is easily the Coven's most valuable item. A character that stares into the depths of the pool of inky black still liquid in the center of the well perceive a dark-skinned, naked humanoid shape with bat-like wings, an elongated head, and long, thin arms. His legs trail away into nothingness, and his skin is smooth and devoid of obvious features. His face is dominated by a mouth filled with hundreds of needle-sharp fangs, and his sunken eyes seem to have almost withdrawn into his skull. This creature is Ahazu the Seizer, the demon lord who created the Wells of Darkness only to become one of its most enigmatic prisoners. Despite the vivid description, no official art is available for Ahazu the Seizer that I have found, so you'll have to settle for my artistic interpretation. While all other pools are mere windows into Shattered Night, Ahazu's is actually a planar tear. Contact with the pool's surface causes the black liquid to extrude dozens of tendrils that writhe and clamber up the length of whatever they touch. An object thrown into the pool is engulfed and drawn into Shattered Night in the space of one round. This item is effectively annihilated and gone forever, which means that even items that would return to their owner via magic no longer do so. Artifacts placed into the pool simply rest on its surface. Tendrils grasp the artifact but cannot draw it into Shattered Night. Ahazu can create a demonic pact with a creature or player character by meeting three requirements. Number 1, the ability to communicate with Ahazu. Number 2, a successful DC 40 diplomacy check. And number 3, a willingness to agree to Ahazu's minimum requirements. There are several ways to do each of these, all detailed in Dungeon Magazine issue 148, so let's take a look at those. Making contact. The first way to make contact with Ahazu is simple. As with most other Wells of Darkness, any creature who physically touches the pool can speak telepathically to Ahazu. Telepathic contact with Ahazu is easier than any of the other prisoners, as it only requires both Ahazu and the creature who wish to initiate contact to touch the window of the pool. No other conditions must be met for this to work. However, this is unfortunately the most dangerous way to establish contact with the Seizer. As I mentioned earlier, there are consequences to touching the planar tear. A creature who touches the pool must make a DC 30 will save. The creature gets a plus 10 bonus for having the Tooth of Ahazu on their person, or if they have the tooth implanted in their mouth, they automatically succeed. Success means that the creature telepathically contacts Ahazu and may communicate freely with the Demon Lord as long as they keep contact with the window. Failure means that a creature is pulled through the planar tear in one round as a face-like wave rises from the pool to engulf them. Another creature may try to free their ally with a DC 25 strength check before the round is over, or a casting of Dispel Evil or Dispel Chaos causes the tendrils to go dormant for one round to allow the trapped creature to escape. If a creature is drawn into Shattered Night, their body and soul are absorbed and become one with Ahazu. This is the true purpose of Ahazu's self-imposed imprisonment. Given enough absorbed lives, Ahazu can emerge from Shattered Night as a god. The number of lives needed for this process is up to the DM according to Dungeon Magazine issue 148. This brings up some questions, like can Ahazu only absorb creatures that contact his well specifically, or any creature his followers throw into the well? And if he can absorb things from other wells, why does he keep Demon Lords imprisoned rather than absorbing what are certainly powerful souls? The text says specifically any creature drawn into Shattered Night, so most likely demon lords are not absorbed either because they are too strong or because it would draw too much suspicion and cause Ahazu to become a target. But that's just a logical theory I came up with. Additionally, supporting that is that when the original Cult of Ahazu was throwing creatures into other wells, they didn't seem to maintain imprisonment. It almost seemed like Ahazu would absorb them. But when the Varangoin came in, they started using it as a prison, so it would be illogical to have those prisoners disappear without explanation. Again, just my opinion, just what I've pieced together. A creature absorbed this way is gone forever, excluding the use of a wish or miracle spell. Optionally, direct intervention by a deity could perhaps restore the character to existence, quote, but doing so may have unforeseen repercussions on that deity left to you to determine, end quote. Two other ways exist to contact Ahazu. Firstly, using the Contact Other Planes spell puts a mind in contact with the demon lords without the need to touch the pool's surface. The spell Wish and Miracle can achieve the same result by copying the effect of Contact Other Planes. The final way to contact the Seizer can be achieved by a creature of the Binder class. A Binder who binds with Ahazu as a Vestige can communicate with him as long as they remain within 30 feet of the pool's surface, like the Varangoin that guarded the well. Once you finally make contact with Ahazu, negotiations can begin. Ahazu is a terrifying demon lord whose words ring with the cold, lonely emptiness of the void. He clutches his prisoners like precious jewels and is loath to let even one detainee escape his grasp. Before even entertaining a request to release a prisoner, a character needs to make a DC 40 diplomacy check with a +5 bonus for having the Tooth of Ahazu on their purpose, or a +10 if the character displays the sign of Ahazu, either by having implanted the tooth or having been bound to him as a vestige. If the character is a binder and negotiates the pact during a binding attempt, they receive a +20 circumstance bonus on the check. So if a binder is currently binding to Ahazu and decides to negotiate in the middle of the binding, they will receive a bonus for basically signing up to be a binder for Ahazu. Finally, sealing the pact. If a PC wishes to free a prisoner, Ahazu demands a replacement. In The Wells of Darkness from Dungeon Magazine issue 148, it mentions that he teases the character in contact with him by musing that they may be a good replacement, but then decides that the character is, quote, too weak and insignificant to warrant such an honor, end quote. The replacement must be of a much greater power than the freed prisoner. In the example given in Dungeon Magazine 148, in order to free Shami-amourae, who is a challenge rating 19, Ahazu requires the PCs to bring him a challenge rating 24 or greater prisoner. 5 whole challenge ratings greater. That's the difference between an ancient green dragon and a chromatic great worm in 5th edition, or the difference between a Balor and graz'zt the demon lord in 5th edition. He does not require the replacement to be alive at the time of imprisonment, nor does he require it immediately. Ahazu grudgingly grants an interval between the current prisoner's liberation and the replacement imprisonment. In the case of Shami-amourae, he gives players no more than 66 days to deliver him the replacement. The new replacement must be brought to the well in a helpless state, or dead also works. Ahazu draws the new prisoner into the well, which causes the well to immediately change to match the new occupant's temperament. If the PCs fail to fulfill their end of the bargain, the pact plucks all of them, not just the PC who forged the pact, from wherever they may be in the multiverse and absorbs them into Shattered Night. To quote Dungeon Magazine issue 148, quote, since the PCs entered into the pact of their own free will, there is nothing, not even the gods themselves, that can prevent this horrific fate. End quote. However, the Seizer has long feared that his enemies would discover his plans to use Scattered Night as a catalyst to achieve divinity, which further supports my theory as to why he doesn't absorb notable figures in the Wells of Darkness. And with his tooth out there granting all manner of creatures access to his essence, it could, in the hands of the right individual, lead his enemies to this discovery. Ahazu lowers the requirements for prisoners to escape if he is given his tooth. In the case of shami-amourae, if granted his tooth, Ahazu only requires the replacement to be of equal or greater power, so a CR-19 replacement for the CR-19 shami-amourae. The Wells of Darkness adventure also details that once the pact is sealed, Ahazu's well seems to drop several degrees as a fog wafts up from the pool, shrouding the character's hands and clearing a moment later to reveal a Book of Infinite Spells, a magic item I won't get into too much here, but I may make a video on it in the future because they are very unique. The book contains one spell, Freedom, that Ahazu explains will free shami-amourae if cast from this particular book while standing at the edge of shami-amourae's well. The Seizer then breaks contact with a soft chuckle, almost as if he had been planning events to take this course all along. Whether Ahazu has a book for each prisoner of the Wells of Darkness, or if each key is different, isn't stated, but given how specific he is with having to use that particular book for shami-amourae, each well probably has very specific steps unique to each prisoner. That is the main chunk of Ahazu's lore, but we still have two more things to cover, his tooth and his vestige. And since we are talking about the tooth already, let's take a look at that. The Tooth of Ahazu is a minor artifact detailed in Dungeon Magazine issue 143. The tooth is from a collection known as the Teeth of Varangoin, named after the human cleric and binder Varangoin. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but at this point, who knows? I'll probably cover the whole collection of teeth in another video. Interestingly, the Tooth of Ahazu is one tooth not listed in the 5th edition Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. The Tooth of Ahazu can be found in the treasure trove of Zotz'zilaha, the all-man deity of bats and horrible things that fly in the night. The tooth was not originally in this treasure trove, but it was placed there by an agent of Malankathet as part of Malankathet's plan to get information from shami-amourae, but we'll probably touch on that in another Demon Lord video, probably Malankathet's or shami-amourae's, one of them. The Tooth of Ahazu is an ancient artifact that grants a physical link to the long-dead Demon Lord Ahazu, well, dead in really heavy quotes. To use the tooth, a character must remove one of their own teeth and replace it with the Tooth of Ahazu, and the tooth must be implanted for one full day before the ability can be used. The only real ability that is directly affecting statistics is that it allows creatures to make grapple checks as if they are one size category larger than they really are. In 3.5e, this means they also gain a bonus to grapple checks, a medium creature now gaining a +4 bonus, being treated as if they were large. Now that is the only real upside to the tooth, but the tooth does affect the wielder in a number of other ways. The fell influence of Ahazu that seeps through the tooth causes the skin of the wielder to become cold to the touch and turns the inside of their mouth black. The wielder is also infected by Ahazu's greed, which encourages them to steal small, precious objects whenever the opportunity is available. A creature can resist Ahazu's influence, but if they do, they take a -1 penalty on attack rolls, saving throws, skill checks, and ability checks, as long as they continue to resist, and so long as the tooth remains in their mouth. The only way a foe can remove the tooth is to render the wielder helpless and physically remove it. The actual act of removing the tooth causes no damage to the current wielder. The Tooth of Ahazu does not occupy a magic item body slot. This just means that it doesn't count as headwear in the case a character wanted to use a magic crown or amulet or goggles, etc. The tooth is tagged as a moderate transmutation item and has a caster level of 9th, being worth 6,000 gold pieces, so fairly low to middle range, as powerful as something made by a 9th level spellcaster. Not 9th level spell slots, but a 9th level spellcaster. And finally, let's take a look at Ahazu's Vestige. While Ahazu is not technically dead, he isn't technically alive either. Due to this and his substantial power, magical pact makers called binders can use pact magic to draw power from his vestige. The special requirement for Ahazu's Vestige is the binder must draw Ahazu's seal on the surface of one of the pools of darkness at the bottom of the wells of darkness. Once this is done, a manifestation of Ahazu appears, beginning as a sphere of darkness that slowly takes shape, revealing a dark-skinned naked humanoid with bat-like wings, an elongated head, and arms similar to that of a bodak. His legs trail away into nothingness, and his skin is smooth and devoid of obvious features. The Seizer's mouth, which is filled with hundreds of needle-sharp fangs, yawns under a pair of sunken eyes which have partially withdrawn into his skull, so very much like how he appears in Shattered Night beneath his pool. The sign of Ahazu that appears once a binder has made this pact is their skin becomes cold to the touch, and the inside of the binder's mouth is cloaked in absolute darkness, and periodically expels clouds of black smoke. If a binder makes a poor pact when making their check, they are influenced by Ahazu. Like his tooth, Ahazu infects the pact maker with avarice, which causes them to steal small precious objects whenever the opportunity presents itself, if they feel they can do so without getting caught. Similarly, to the tooth, binders who act against this influence take a -1 to attack rolls, saving throws, and checks in general. This covetousness extends to the lives of a binder's enemies as well. They must try to imprison enemies alive in a dark hellhole rather than kill them or let them escape. If the binder allows an enemy to escape, they become racked with anger and suffer a -4 penalty to all charisma-based checks as long as their binder remains under Ahazu's influence. A binder who binds to Ahazu's Vestige is granted abilities that reflect his demonic origin, his exile in the void, and his obsession with abduction. These abilities are Ahazu's Abduction. You can speak Ahazu's name to cast a creature within 30 feet of you into the void between the planes. The target may resist with a will save, which the DC is 10 plus half your effective binder level plus your charisma modifier. If the creature resists this abduction, you may not target them again with this power for 24 hours. Once a creature is abducted, it remains trapped in the void for 1 round, effectively losing its action on that round of combat. You can use this ability at will. Next is Ahazu's Touch. You can produce an effect identical to Unholy Blight, where the caster level is your binder level, on a creature you touch. The target is cloaked in a cold, cloying miasma of greasy darkness that takes damage as appropriate for their alignment, as shown in Unholy Blight. Once you do this, you cannot do so again for 5 rounds. Blind Sight. You have the Blind Sight extraordinary ability to a range of 5 feet per binder level to a max of 100 feet. And finally, Void Mind. As a standard action, you can withdraw your mind and soul into the void beyond the boundaries of the planes, rendering you immune to spells, spell-like effects, and supernatural effects with the mind-affecting descriptor, or that affects souls such as Magic Jar, Soulbind, and Trap the Soul, as long as this vestige remains bound to you. If you die while employing this granted power, you cannot be brought back to life with a Raise Dead or Resurrection spell. And that is it. We've looked at Ahazu's lore, powers, related tooth, and his vestige. Now you know everything there is to know about Ahazu, other than really stats, but there are no stats specific to Ahazu in official Dungeons & Dragons canon. I'll touch on the Wells of Darkness in another video, and the Wells of Captive Demon Lords when I make videos on that specific Demon Lord. So I'll touch on Shami-amourae as well when I touch on her, and so on and so forth. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a lot of research. If you did enjoy, please leave a like and consider subscribing to help the channel grow, and so you know when more videos come out like this, like more Demon Lord videos, or just any Dungeons & Dragons stuff I make. Thanks again, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!